Natasha, and welcome to the podcast. I always like to start with people asking people to explain or describe their educational background.
Sure. Yeah. I have my bachelor's degree in cellular and molecular biology and cellular and molecular neuroscience.
Hmm.
Um, I was always interested in doing cancer research. So I also, after receiving my bachelor's, I conferred my Master of Science in cellular and molecular oncology. So I have since been working in oncology since I finished my master's degree.
Yeah. And then you decided after you finished your master's degree that you didn't want to stay in research.
It was actually during my graduate program that I learned about medical writing. I was actually a member of AMWA as a student, and my plan was to go straight into medical writing from graduate school. I've been a long time writer. It's always been, like a personal passion of mine. But in terms of career, I pursued science, and it wasn't until graduate school that I learned that medical writers, that this is a career option for people. So that was what I was originally going to pursue instead of staying in academia and or industry and doing research. Unfortunately, though, I finished my master's degree in 2020. So it was a tough time for, people finding jobs. It was a tough time for new graduates. It was a very competitive landscape in terms of the job market. So, although I was trying to break into the industry straight out of graduate school, it just didn't work out for me that way. Obviously it was unprecedented time for a lot of people, and I basically just kind of how the dominoes fell. I stayed in research, which I wasn't necessarily unhappy about. I mean, I love research. I love what I do. I'm very passionate about my work. Um, I have just always, dreamed really of and like seen when I picture myself in 10 years, I always really thought I would be, a medical writer, and writing, full time and using my knowledge of science and cancer to, help people understand it better. Um, so it really wasn't until last year that because like I said, I love research. I do love my current full-time role. I work at AbbVie, and it's a fantastic company, and I love that I work in early discovery, so I'm very, very close to like creating new ideas for new drugs, and I'm really close to like the cutting edge part of the science. But I did feel like I was really missing, part of who I am, which is the writing. And because I'm so early in the process, there isn't a lot of writing involved with what I do. Um, so I started seriously thinking about, remember a couple of years back when I really wanted to be a medical writer. And I tried to pursue, doing like a career shift and working, still staying in like corporate America, and becoming a medical writer. But unfortunately, it didn't really work out. I didn't have a lot of opportunities that I came across. And as I mentioned, I'm a member of AMWA, which is the American Medical Writers Association. I actually took up a leadership position my local chapter, and I was meeting a lot of people who are medical writers, who are also like part-time medical writers who freelance. And that's when I kind of learned that freelancing is a viable option for people, that you don't need to be, a full-time medical writer in corporate America for 10 years before you become a freelancer. Like that's actually an option that people can pursue whenever they want. And I was introduced to freelance medical writing coach. And she's been really helpful to kind of, help create, like take this insightful idea and actually help me generate it into something real, and to create a freelance medical writing business, and learn how to acquire customers and, even learn how to like market myself online. So that's all been extremely, invaluable to starting my freelance medical writing business.
So now you're full time in a business. You're full time running.
No, I do still have my full-time role.
Okay.
The freelancing is only, part-time right now.
Right.
I'm still very early in the process. So,
Yeah.
it's actually why I wanted to do this podcast because I'm in a very, interesting situation because I am an academic and I do work full-time, but I am right now, as we're speaking, breaking into the industry and I certainly have, a lot to say about, how to get started, how to make this transition, right now. I know a lot of people who have been trying to make who have made the transition from academia to medical writing 10 years ago, but I think the landscape is very different
Yeah,
nowadays.
let's talk about that. That's really interesting because I got my first job. Well, I was freelancing for a while, from about 2017 on the side of my postdoc, not PhD, my postdoc, and then lost my job. Then was freelancing until about 2021, and that's when I got my first full-time role. But let's
Mhm.
talk about you and like I love the fact that you're like right now what's working. So,
Yeah.
so how did you get that first job at AbbVie? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I well, it's like I mentioned, I live in Chicago. So it's certainly not the East Coast or the West Coast where there's a lot of, different pharmaceutical companies. I mean, there's a lot of, great institutions here as well. So like I mentioned, I was in academia. Right after COVID, I actually took on a writing job at my lab because I was struggling. I actually basically what happened is I had a different job lined up, a research job at University of Chicago, and it all fell through because basically every place around me instituted a hiring freeze. So I was in the middle of like job searching, and COVID hit, and I'm like trying to finish my thesis. And then COVID hits, and I have, interviews and everything set up. And then everyone says, sorry, we're shutting our doors right now because of COVID. So I was in a really, really tough predicament. Like, what am I supposed to do now? Like, I can't even really search for a job because a lot of places are not hiring at all. So my PI was very, very kind, and he knew that I wanted to break into writing. So he gave me the opportunity. We had a lot of like a bunch of different clinical trials running in our lab at the time. So I was doing preclinical research, but we also had a few people in our lab who were, managing the clinical trials. And I was able to do some of the regulatory writing for our clinical trials. So I actually got to get my feet wet there, for a little bit, which was fantastic. And and I was, also job searching. So
I have a
after a
quick
few
question
months,
before you continue. This is
Mhm.
really, really fascinating to me, right? So, within your lab, you became like their regulatory writer for a clinical trial that was happening.
Yeah.
Had you had training on regulatory writing? What resources were you
Mhm.
able to use to help you like immediate? Because it's, you're not taught those skills necessarily in
Oh, absolutely
this
not. Yeah.
program.
I mean, the clinical trial was run like just with our lab. It wasn't, a collaboration with anyone else. So actually, our lab manager was the one who was managing all the documentation uh, and actually creating the product and everything for the clinical trials because it was a cell therapy lab. So we were generating the product that was going into humans ourselves. So she actually was able to teach me everything. She gave me all the templates for, and kind of walked me through how to generate these documents and how to write them properly for submission. There was a really, really great opportunity for me to learn about regulatory writing, which is my primary interest in medical writing as well. But as I mentioned, it was still COVID, so the opportunity was scarce. in terms of the job market. So I was still applying because, although I loved working there and I loved the people I worked with, the general understanding, is like, you got to leave the nest after grad school. Like you have to go and go to a different institution or go into industry. So I was still trying to, make that next step despite COVID. In Chicago, there's really like very few big pharmaceutical companies, and the best ones, like year over year, are Abbott and AbbVie. And so I'll never forget. I told my husband, or who was my boyfriend at the time, that I am only accepting job offers from Abbott or AbbVie. Like I know that this is an unprecedented time, and it's maybe not the best time in the world to be like nitpicky about where I'm going to work, but it kind of felt like I had worked so hard and I had waited so long, and now like I was struggling so hard with this that it only felt right to only accept something that was like worth the wait. Like it was I knew that's where I really wanted to be. I wanted to go into industry, and because I wanted to go to one of those two places so badly, I was applying for both industry, like writing and industry research positions. And just, I said earlier, kind of just how the dominoes fell, I happened to get an offer for a research position before I got an offer for a medical writing position. And so that's why I stayed in research for, the last few years. Not because I guess not out of, the force of my hand, but because I also do love research. So it was kind of like, this is a great opportunity. I would be silly to say no,
Every other Friday, I send out an email newsletter to about 3,000 PhDs and academics on tips, tools, and resources that you can use to build a career you love. And I'm inviting you to join us. You can go to theboldphd.com/careers list. Again, that's theboldphd.com/careers list. Let's get back into the episode.
No, this is such a fantastic story, and thank you so much for sharing, right? So I want to, sometimes what I like to do is to talk about the mechanics of like applying for these jobs. Did you simply like, I love how you're like, it's Abbott or Abby?
Yeah.
Did you go online to apply for these jobs? Did you leverage people in your network? How did that happen? What was that process like?
Yeah. So I'm first generation American. I'm the first person in like any of my family to get a college degree. I am the only person, like the only scientist. I'm the only person with a professional degree as well. So I had no direction or really help, like growing up. Like I said, I have immigrant parents. My dad grew up on a farm. My mom grew up in like rural Poland. So neither of my parents went to college or anything. So I did a lot of figuring out on my own. So actually, like high school was kind of eye-opening to me. And I understood that I really wanted to pursue science in high school. And I was always under the impression that if you like science, you become a doctor, and that's your only option. And then in college, I learned that there's like more things you can do with a science degree. So that's when I learned about research. So, and I was like, I'm not really interested in going to medical school. Like, I love science and I want to help people, but I'm not super interested in being like patient facing and, and becoming a doctor and, what that means. And so I was actually dabbling in research in undergrad, and then I found this, funnily enough, it was at my college graduation. So I had planned to go to get my master's degree in biomedical sciences, but it was more of like a academic master's degree. And while I'm sitting at my graduation ceremony for my bachelor's degree, I get an email in my inbox. Oh, we've just announced this brand new program in molecular oncology, this like research master's program. And I applied to it while I was waiting to be called up to walk across the stage. And that's kind of, that's how a lot of things have happened for me, because I didn't have anyone to help me or guide me. It's just things that have I've come across or have fallen into my lap that other people have told me, this would be a great opportunity. That's how I've pursued my entire career. So I didn't really have, in terms of getting these jobs, I didn't have a network. I had what I knew about the companies, and I knew that, what I had learned from school and even just, hearing things on LinkedIn, how to, secure your dream job. And it was really just a matter of applying, making sure my resume was absolutely fantastic, that I have, all of my writing samples in order, I have my thesis in order, and making sure that I have like a full package that represents me to send off to these places. Because I didn't have, I didn't have the networking capabilities. I didn't know anyone that worked there. I don't even have any family that works at like, research institutions or, other universities that would even have any connections in the industry. So I was kind of like, on my lonesome trying to figure it out. So and it happened to work out. I think I was very lucky in that aspect. It didn't happen very quickly. It took me a little while, but I think I'm kind of living proof that, if you put your mind to something, you can really make it happen.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing that also. I think that's one of the challenges, right? I remember when I was an adjunct professor at a community college, one of the populations I worked with was first generation college students. And this was a thing, right? Where they've never had anybody in their family, be in a particular position. And so it's even sometimes getting the basic support to do stuff is hard, right? Mm-hmm. And so I love that you said you listen to you, there were people on LinkedIn, you listen to them. And I think maybe this is a plug for, I know that social media is abundant and sometimes there's a lot of scammy advice out there, but there's also a lot of good advice, right? And if you take that and apply it, and in your case, you are also a part of phenomenal groups like AMWA, and they also have fantastic resources. And I actually have gotten I'm not part of AMWA. I registered for some of their courses a long time ago when I was getting started. But I've had a lot of people ask me, do you think I should get a certification from AMWA or one of these other types of organizations? Do you think that's helpful, Natasha, to get a certification through these groups?
Yeah, so I don't personally. I have the essential skills certification. I haven't been working as a full-time medical writer, or I don't think you have to be full-time, but you have to be working as a medical writer for at least 2 years to get the official AMWA medical writer certification. So I just haven't been working in the industry actively for long enough yet. I do plan on doing it. I think like many other things, it can help bolster your resume, bolster your credibility. Especially, I do not have a PhD. I only have a master's degree. So, now more than ever, and I think
that's a lot. By the way, I just want to pause and say having a master's degree is a lot.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's being surrounded by PhDs, sometimes you sell yourself a little bit short. I know that, but I think it does help. Especially now because. Like I mentioned, during COVID, it was an unprecedented time. And I feel like actually the medical writing industry has exploded since COVID. And I think part of that reason actually is because a lot of PhDs and even people who went to pharmacy school, PharmDs, they are not following, the traditional route anymore. A lot of PhDs are realizing, I actually don't want to, pursue a postdoc and become a PI or go into industry. They're also looking at alternative routes, for their career. So I think a lot of PhDs now, more than ever, are actually becoming medical writers straight out of school. So I think that's, for people who have master's degrees, I think now more than ever, any kind of credibility we can add because because the landscape is more competitive now, especially if someone is comparing even a person who has a master's degree with a few years of experience and someone who is a new grad PhD, unfortunately the way the world works is they're usually going to look at the PhD. I know even the freelancing website CollabTree, you can filter people by PhDs. There's like a, a little button that you could just turn it on so you only see people with PhDs. So, I can't vouch for, PhDs for the certification, but definitely I would say if you have a master's degree, I would do everything in your power to help bolster your resume and increase your credibility, whether that means, doing certifications, even doing coaching programs, other, tangible things that you can say, I do have the skills to do this, it's an unfortunate reality. I don't think it's not true that, just because someone has a PhD that they're a better writer than me. But I, unfortunately, when it comes to clients and stuff, that's usually what's in their mind. So I think really anything that could help benefit you, or even, your resume and credibility is great and all, but it's also really nice to sharpen your skills. At least for the essential skills certification, I was going through sentence structure and grammar and things that I haven't studied since I was in grade school. And it was actually a fantastic reminder of like how to write clearly and concisely and properly. That isn't just, I'm like I said, I'm a passionate writer. This is something I've loved to write my whole life. So I definitely see sometimes where I lean towards being more conversational and like flowy, and I'll write how I speak. And sometimes it's not the most proper, prim and proper way to write. So it was a nice like brush up and reminder of like how to write well, not just, not just how to write and get a point across, but to actually write eloquently and with proper structure. So sometimes it's good, it's good to brush up on your skills at the very least,
Hey, did you know that I speak to and train groups at universities, colleges, and professional organizations on the topics I cover on this channel? I do. So if your group would like to bring me in virtually or in person to cover intentional career design, personal branding that builds your career, careers within scientific communications or biotech, go to theboldphd.com/speaking.
Very helpful, very helpful, very helpful feedback there. So are there any books, courses, or resources that you recommend for somebody that may want to come into regulatory writing like you are? Are there books, resources, courses that you recommend for them to maybe brush up or, have that knowledge base so that they are more competitive, right?
Yeah. So I do know AMWA just recently actually released, and I don't know if it's technically a certification or just a course, but it's in regulatory writing. So I think that would actually be a really great place to start if that's something you're interested in. If you're looking to break into the industry, I would definitely say, like first base would be doing the AMWA Essential Skills. I think that would be, a good way to really figure out, is this for me? Like, is this something that I like? Because, it takes writing and puts it in the context of medical writing. So you get to learn the more like technical aspects of it if it's something you don't already know. And I think if you can make it through that course, and you enjoyed it and what wasn't torture, then I think, you may have a good idea that this career choice could be for you. There is also University of Chicago has a few different actual certifications. So they have like general medical writing. They do have a regulatory writing certification course as well. I think they have a few other programs as well, like subsets of medical writing. They have a medical editing. They do have the medical, like the general medical writing, the regulatory writing. That may be it, or there might be one more, but I don't remember. I've heard actually fantastic things about that program as well. It is definitely more expensive than the AMWA certifications and courses. So I would say, it kind of depending on your experience, if you are very inexperienced in, science and medical writing, doing like, a more involved certification like that might be more helpful to, help get your feet wet in the industry. But I think a good way to suss out if you would like medical writing is AMWA has also, in addition to like the certifications, they have tons of courses like just like small sections, hour-long seminars about all different topics in medical writing, including regulatory, CME, even like marketing stuff for medical writing. So that would be a really great place to start. It's relatively short form. They're inexpensive courses as well. So to kind of really understand what are all of these different subsets of medical writing and which one do I like best.
That's very, very helpful. Thank you, Natasha. This has been such a great conversation. Like as we end, are there any last words of wisdom you would give to somebody who in 2025 is finishing a master's degree and is pretty sure they want to transition out of academia? What would you tell them?
What I've learned through this process is that LinkedIn is really, really important. I've tried to like network even at people who work at, big corporations and stuff, and I haven't been as successful. I think LinkedIn is actually fantastic community of people who are professionally oriented and are also looking to network and make more connections in their field, and are looking for mutually beneficial relationships. If you can start a conversation up with me and these people are interested in helping you, like, they want to help other people and they, want to be helped by you. So I think that has been just so instrumental in learning about my industry, learning who works in my industry, meeting these people, asking what they do, what does your daily life look like? Because every medical writer has all different things that especially freelancers, like we're all over the board in terms of what therapeutic areas we're in, what deliverables, what type of medical writing we do, our niche. Like there's a plethora of different options for people, and you can just cherry pick like what your favorite is. So really like getting to know people in the industry. Like I said earlier, I have just, being like a sponge and being a listener and meeting people and learning about what they do has been instrumental for me figuring out what I want to do and what I want my career to look like.
Yes, agreed. I've also benefited so much from LinkedIn, so totally co-sign. Well, this is great. If people want to find you, where can they go?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn, just under my name, Natasha Falico.
Yeah, Natasha. All right. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me.
Of course. Yeah, it was really great meeting you.